everybody, and welcome to another Boss Ratings with Anomaly. Today we're talking about Krosus, the bridge boss from the Nighthold, which of course is from the Legion expansion. And I'm getting a little close to the camera here because let me tell you, this was a beautiful boss. It was a beautiful raid. We're finally maybe getting to some of the good ones, but we'll see. So let's go through it. Let's talk about a little bit of the lore, a little bit of what the fight was about, go over some of the strategies of what you did, and then finally we'll rate it all and figure out, is this the new top spot? Is this the new bottom spot? Who knows? But let's get into it. So first up, of course, who is Krosus? What is Krosus? Where did she come from, right? Well, Krosus, of course, is a massive Doom Lord. We first see him or her. We first see them in the opening scenario, and they look to have killed Tyrion Fordring, which is not the best start. They then, of course, get destroyed by the combined might of the Horde and the Alliance at the Broken Shore. We sort of, pound them down. They end up at the bottom of the bay, between Suramar between the Nighthold, and Tuma Sargeras, and eventually get resurrected, sort of power themselves up, and become the fourth boss of the Nighthold, essentially. So they were in the Nighthold fourth boss. It's the bridge boss. I mean, it's the iconic nature of the bridge boss. I think if you just mention, hey, it's got to do that bridge boss, like people will ultimately sort of funnel in and say like, yeah, that's Krosus at this point. So what exactly was Krosus? He was, of course, a boss you fought at the end of a bridge, which was very unique at the time. You could only really see the top half of him. His legs were, of course, purported to be under the water. I swam down there, I didn't see anything, but of course she died pretty quickly underwater. So he was that boss. I had a bunch of interesting mechanics. I mean, some of his more mundane, we'll go over sort of everything, but some of the more mundane mechanics to start. He had a stacking tank debuff. Honestly, that's your tank swap mechanic. After 6, 7-ish stacks, swap tanks, easy peasy. I also did an ability called an Orb of Destruction, which of course was a ability to target a single player and would do fall off damage. Essentially did more damage the closer you were to this player. Those guys would have to run away, everybody else had to run forward, and there was sort of like this space idea, which gets interesting the way the fight moves on. From there he had his fell beams. Essentially he would Iron Man out some fell on one side of the platform, just dodge it, move left, move right. Not that hard. And then finally, his next ability was an ability called Burning Pitch, which essentially put little swirlies everywhere. I think there was a lot of these, and the idea was that you had to soak them, and any ones that wouldn't soak would turn into little ads you then had to kill. Those ads were small to start. Some of them could become empowered, and if the empowered ones essentially got bigger and increased their energy regeneration, anytime or at once an ad got to 100 energy, it would explode, essentially killing the raid. The idea is you want to try and soak as many as you can, then immediately DPS the rest of them down, so they didn't inadvertently wipe the raid. And then the final ability that he had was Slam, which essentially was a large amount of raid damage. He would slam basically both his fists down onto the platform or the bridge you were standing on, and after his third slam, that piece of the bridge would break away. And there were 4 sections of the bridge, right, that he would eventually break away. So basically he'd do 2 slams, third one then comes in, bridge breaks away, got to run back as a raid. When he did slam on the first 2, there were little circles that he put under his fists. Tanks would need to soak those, or those would also do raid-wide AoE damage, so you sort of had your tank split. One was always left, one was always right. Easy peasy lemon squeezy in that case. However, Slam is the iconic ability. And the idea that these work together was like, at first you had all this range. So, the big Orb of Destruction that came out, you had plenty of space to get away. You took very little damage. The problem was with Burning Pitches, you had a lot of, room to cover. Those got easier as the fight went on. However, you took more damage. And then it, of course, was a very, very tight DPS check. I think this was a 6-minute hard and rage. At the 6-minute mark was exactly when he would do his final slam on the final section of the platform. And you had nowhere else to stand except on the water that essentially instantly killed you. So strategy-wise, I mean, he was a very straightforward boss strategy-wise in most regards, right? The biggest thing was maximizing the amount of damage you could do to him or her, they, while also controlling the ads and also having enough healing to survive. Because it definitely, these abilities did damage. Orb of Destruction hurt. Like slams hurt, and they would be back to back, right? And so as a healer, particularly, which is what I played at the time, you had to basically manage the idea of understanding what was the next ability coming up. Did I need to heal this person right away, or could I wait? Because I know the damage would ramp up slowly the longer the fight went on, because these orbs were closer, the raid would take more damage. There'd be slams that would be coming in. So it was definitely the type of fight where, there was no new abilities on Mythic. All these same abilities were there in Heroic, but they just did more damage, and the DPS checks were tighter. So it was a very like really another patchwork style fight. However, it sort of combined this sort of movement, moving up and down this platform of up and down this bridge, with sort of making sure you killed the ads. If you soaked more pitches, if your raid was better about spreading out, getting further back, soaking all the pitches, you had less ads to deal with, means more boss DPS time, right? So there's a lot of like little optimizations you could do. On top of that, it was a 3 heal fight, which a lot of the Nighthold fights were lower healing, which we'll eventually talk about, but or we may have already talked about depending on when you're watching this. This was the 3 heal fight, which was very, very intense from a healing perspective, and it didn't just stop there. I mean, the DPS perspective, it was just as intense, right? Because it was such a close check. Many a raid killed Krosus as his final slam went off and there was nothing left. I think my first kill, I know my first kill was was the boss slamming down, us killing it, and everybody else dying, right? But the boss had died. So, I mean, that is Krosus. There's not really much strategy wise. You use your heroism off the start, doing as much damage as you can, soaking as many pitches as you can, and maybe you did some micro adjustments, right? Where you had your rogues going further because they had sprint, your range going further, your mages going the furthest because they had blink, right? You use wind rush totems, stampeding roars and sort of succession to make sure people could just spread as far as they could, soak those pitches, having the ads do less damage, having some priority ad damage, right? Because if he accelerated or made one of the ads larger, you had just a short amount of time before that ad reached 100 energy and wiped you. And on top of that, it's just like dying to the beam is still just iconic, because it's like everybody left. And like you're just one dude is just like, I gotta finish this healer, I gotta finish this cast, and just doesn't move. And yeah, I mean we even had people like running off the bridge, because the sides of the bridge you could run off of. So it was cool. I mean, Bridge Boss was such a good fight. Really enjoyed it. Probably one of my favorite fights in the instance, at least in this instance, right? So I'm gonna be a little biased maybe, but I mean, in general, it was a cool boss. I mean, it was tight DPS check, tight healing check, and the mechanics themselves were not overly difficult, but you are required to do them and would require you to make very specific decisions, which is cool, right? Is cool from a decision perspective. So in any event, what or how did we rate this fight, right? So I gave this fight an 8 out of 10 on the execution side. With the tight DPS check, the tight healing check, you needed to be on point for this one. Even your tanks to a lesser extent, make sure they were in the right circles, they were moving from side to side. There's just a lot of things going on in this fight. Execution 8 out of 10. From a strategy perspective, gave this one a 4 out of 10. Strategy is fairly straightforward. There's some micro adjustments, like I mentioned, optimizations you could do with pushing some of your faster classes, your more mobile classes, further back on the platform to soak the burning pitches. Also from a DPS cooldown perspective, making sure like you maybe had some defensive up for some specific instances, healers, making sure you have those defensives or those raid cooldowns for those certain instances, particularly late. So making sure you maybe use something earlier than you would have, just so it is up later. You're not sort of holding it for the majority of the fight. So strategy, 4 out of 10. Key mechanics, I gave this one a 5 out of 10. Potentially should be a little bit higher. Really the only iconic one is the bridge slam. I mean, maybe I should make it higher, but we're going with 5 out of 10 on this one. It is a cool sort of, slam your fist type thing, but that's really the biggest one, and there's only one of them there. From a unique interaction perspective, 3 out of 10, not much here other than, more mobile classes definitely benefited during Burning Pitch. But at the end of the day, like when you're close, when you got no space to move, doesn't matter how fast you're moving, right? You just need the survivability at that point. So 3 out of 10 on the unique interaction side of things. Flipping over to style, look, and feel, give an 8 out of 10 on the boss area. I mean, it's like, it's the bridge boss. Like, while it's just a bridge, it's like a normal, at the time, elven architecture type bridge in the bay, You see like the two Mr. guys in the distance. There's not much, but it is the bridge boss, and giving this anything less than 8 out of 10, I think, was a crime. In terms of lore, this is actually a fairly high score, I think, in my mind, but I gave it a 7 out of 10, primarily because you do meet Krosus very early on. He does, seemingly kill Tyrion. Spoilers, Tyrion's not really dead. So there is some backstory, like what it is. It's a massive demon lord, thing. So you get some backstory with it. And then it's just, I mean, honestly, from a boss story perspective, like, you killed it once, didn't do the job. The second time, dude, you knock it out. In terms of boss model, I give this one an 8 out of 10. Just the fell in like his armor and like the way that you just see his torso and like his hands just look heavy in terms of slamming. 8 out of 10. Boss model looks good, man. It fits, looks good. The demonness of his face. He's got like the tentacle fingers coming off the sides. I mean, it's a demon lord. It's super cool looking. And finally, memorability, 9 out of 10. When you say a single set of words that are not the boss name and people immediately go, yes, I remember doing that. I remember what happened. I remember the bridge slamming. I remember having to like run backwards. I remember the damage I needed to do or the healing I needed to do. Dude, it's a 9 out of 10. Easy. So yeah. So there you have it. You got Krosus. In terms of mechanics and difficulty, ended up as a 20 out of 40. In terms of sound, look, and feel, it was a 32 out of 40. Very high score, which gives it a final score of 52 out of 80. And of course, currently takes the top spot. So there you have it with Krosus. Guys, thank you much for going through this. Thank you for listening. If you guys have, issues, maybe you don't agree with one of my numbers, maybe you think there's a better way to do it, definitely leave a comment, I guess like, subscribe, follow if you want to see more of these. We're trying to do 2 of these a week. We'll see if we can get it done. If not, thanks for at least for listening to this one. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.